mentioned, I've been involved in branding. I actually originally have a technical degree. I'm actually a trained microbiologist. I ran fermentation processes. But quickly I moved across into sales and marketing because I thought I could have a bigger impact there. And creating brands was really fascinating to me. Right, so this was so Douwe Egberts is a 250-year-old coffee company, and it had a huge problem because the market had shifted, and it had shifted away from filtered European coffee to sexy Italian coffee. And so this 250-year-old coffee company had a huge problem. It had to reinvent itself. And this was back in the early 90s, and I'm going to take you through how we did that in Australia, and then it became a worldwide brand as a result of that. It moved towards espresso, so Lavazza is the quintessential Australian brand, Italian brand, and Vittoria was the Australian, second generation Italian brand. And they were the competitors that we were up against. And so Segafredo, lots of great Italian brands out there. And then, so we had to develop Piazza d'Oro. So Piazza d'Oro literally means streets of gold, a very Italian name. So within 5 years, this brand went from 0 to #1 in the food service market in Australia and also in New Zealand. It's gone global, as I mentioned, from there. And it started out as, coming from this Dutch company with everybody saying this is a fake. So Ross mentioned about authentic stories. Well, this brand didn't really have an authentic story. And that probably wasn't so much of a problem back in the early 90s. We chose that name, Piazza d'Oro, because it sounds very Italian. We hired a great Australian-Italian chef called Steve Manfredi. He worked with our master roaster. He developed a specific Italian roast. As a result of that, we gained credibility with our team. We hired baristas, so we hired all men, young Italian baristas. We sent them off to win, we trained them extremely well. We sent them off to win all the barista competitions. That's every state in Australia, the New Zealand one, the British one, the ones in Europe, and then when they won a competition, they came back to Sydney or Melbourne. As I mentioned, we trained them extremely well. They had to be, Italian, arrogant, authoritative, credible, so that when they went out to a cafe or a restaurant, they would walk in. They were all long black hair, slick back, black t-shirt, black trousers, young, fit, a bit of stubble on there. That's the look that they had to have. And they walked in with quite some authority. I've won a barista competition. Your grind is no good. You haven't set this machine correctly. I will show you how to produce correct coffee. And they would go in and they would tell that story, and that brand went from a nothing brand to leading the market within 5 years. Now, and it's still around today, and it's doing extremely well. The things that perhaps you couldn't, changing a Dutch old company into a sexy Italian company is not such an easy thing to do. And Douwe Egberts coffee is still out there. It still sells filter coffee. But it just goes to show, if you put the groundwork in, and if you have a solid proposition, even if your story maybe isn't on a great foundation, back then you could still get somewhere. I want to contrast that now with Ora King. So we had a big problem in that, we would have our customers ring us up and say, are you the real New Zealand King Salmon or the other New Zealand King Salmon? And that was typically we'd get those phone calls from Japan or China because we were only branded in retail. So we have our Regal brand and we have our Southern Ocean brand, but we had no branding in food service. And so all of our customers, we were only in food service overseas, and our customers just knew us as New Zealand King Salmon. All of our competitors can write on their pack New Zealand, and they can all write King Salmon on the pack. And so we didn't really have a point of differentiation. So the first thing we had to do is find a positioning that was really authentic and that we could claim as our own. And we went through all the different positionings that were appropriate for New Zealand King Salmon, for our brand. But the things that we could back up are, we are the biggest producer of king salmon. So we could have used that as our positioning. And often, if you're the biggest, the implication is that you're the best. So we could have used that as part of the positioning. We could have relied on New Zealand provenance. We could have relied on Marlborough provenance. And we have a brand on Marlborough provenance, it's called Regal. It's about to have a television ad, and it's leveraging all you wine people out there who do a great job on branding, I have to say. Because we talk about the terroir of Marlborough, the taste of the terrain is in the wine, and we're introducing the concept of merroir, so the taste of the Marlborough Sounds is in the salmon. And you'll see that in the next couple of weeks, go on to New Zealand television. We grow the biggest king salmon, so we go well over a 4 kilo average fish. We could have done that. Also, you can rely on craftsmanship, artisanship, handmade. Every pin bone is pulled out by hand in our salmon. So all these things we could have relied on. Also freshness and also customer service. So we had a whole plethora of things that could have formed the foundation of Ora King. So we chose breed as the positioning, and we went forward. Telling the story that Ora King is both a breed. It's based on 8 generations. It's been classically bred for the oil content, the skin colour, the flesh colour, the size, the girth, the shape. Everything's been bred specifically for what chefs will appreciate. And chefs and restaurateurs are really good at telling that story, and salespeople aren't good at telling that story. So our strategy is that we're going to fine dining. We require our brand to be on the menu, so wine, I think it's fantastic. You've got the right to be on a menu as a branded proposition, right? Fantastic. And beer, same thing. You've got the right to be on there as a branded proposition, but if you're centre of the plate protein, you virtually never see it as a branded proposition. But the strategy was, we've got a unique breed of king salmon. We're going to go to Michelin star chefs and restaurants around the world, or hatted restaurants around the world. We're going to win them over one by one, and we're going to use social media to cascade that out from there, and we're going to charge somewhere between a 100 and a 300% premium for our product. And we went to Boston, mentioned New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. They've been great to us, great assets, but we were presenting to Brooke and Stacey, and we told them this is the proposition, we're bringing it to the USA, and they laughed for 30 seconds. Now you count 30 seconds, that's a long, long time. So I'm like, really, and eventually Stacey stopped laughing, and she said, look, this is not, first of all, this is not a farmed fish market, this is a wild market. So no one wants your product here. Also, no chef has ever put a brand of a fish, let alone, even a steak. They don't put brands generally on menus, and certainly not of a fish. So we're now 5 years in, and it's all a big success now. And 2 weeks ago, the Michelin star book it launches every year with an update. How many have got 3, 2, 1. They had it in New York City, and it was Ora King Salmon on their menu as the main proposition. So the costs involved, for us the costs weren't high, except at the beginning everybody laughs at you, and I'll just touch on these 2 other brands in a minute. We had a lot of burnout, so we went through 3 marketing managers, 3 marketing general managers before we successfully launched Ora King. And we got completely the opposite strategy of many people. We go to just the top slither of society in most markets that we go to, but we're spread out very thin everywhere. So we had to really grade our fish for the first time and make sure that a Michelin star chef doesn't get disappointed when the fish winds up there. So we have 6 people now in the USA, we have 3 people in Japan, 2 in Australia and 1 in Europe. And they literally do restaurant after restaurant, winning them over, using social media, cascading it out. and using what we call the oil stain strategy of just spreading it out from each chef individually. Right, so this is Chef Rau in Germany and some of his creations there. He's the top chef in Germany. This is when this is in New York. That's our manager. We went to the Waldorf Astoria together, and recently at the Michelin Awards, as I mentioned. And this is an example of what they tweet or Instagram out there. And you'll just see dozens and dozens of them per day if you sign up and follow Aura King. Here's the premium that we get. So this is our competitor. This is Canadian Atlantic salmon. Gee, eyesight's not so good these days. Look up there. Okay, $3.45, and we're getting $7. This is per pound. And so it's just not easy to create brands. You need a lot of belief back at the beginning. You need to stay solid on your foundation. If you can have, you really want to have it based on something really authentic. And then you just need a lot of perseverance, because the whole world will be against you at the beginning, and then they'll all be a big fan at the end. Okay, thank you.